Andrew Harvey reports from Bristol.
The confirmation that Mrs. Milliner did have rabies came less than an hour ago. Samples of her body had been taken from Gloucestershire Royal Hospital, where she was admitted on Saturday. It's also been confirmed that 22 people, including members of Mrs. Milliner's family and medical staff, have now been treated with anti-rabies serum. But this is a precautionary measure. Doctors say there's little chance of anyone having contracted the disease. Dr. John Wright, the local GP who treated Mrs. Milliner last week at a health centre in Stroud, said she didn't mention that she'd been bitten by a dog in India in June. That's why he referred her to a psychiatrist. He felt she was suffering from severe mental fatigue and depression. He was not entirely happy with his own diagnosis, and he felt he had done well to arrange an immediate consultation with the psychiatrist. But relatives claim that doctors at Stroud General Hospital had been told last month about the dog bite. All these issues will be examined in the major internal investigation now underway.
The number of people out of work in Britain went up again in August for the 15th month running. It's now at a new post-war record of 2,940,000, a rise of 88,000 since July. This means nearly 1 in 8 working people are now without a job. Here's our industrial correspondent Ian Ross.
7,500 school leavers left the unemployment register. 96,000 adults joined it. That's 44,000 more than one would expect in a normal August. Adult unemployment is likely to go on rising, but it is true that the underlying rate of increase is still moving down. Other points on the plus side are that the numbers being made redundant have decreased, there are rather fewer working short time, and unemployment's rising faster in a number of European countries. Well, that said, job vacancies remain at a very low level. The Labour Party and the TUC see the figures as an argument for a complete change in economic policy. The CBI as an argument for lower pay settlements. Now, with unemployment less than 60,000 short of the 3 million mark, officials are nevertheless wary of forecasting whether it will reach that level next month, the month after, or when. What isn't clear is how the new supplementary benefit regulations and the increased places on the Youth Opportunities Programme will affect school leaver unemployment next month and after. On Tyneside, the 8th of the government's 11 experimental enterprise zones aimed at attracting industry where jobs are scarce has opened today. Tony Baker has been looking at the response to the scheme.
Tyneside's enterprise zone, the biggest and most expensive in Britain, came into operation without ceremony today, and with officials calculating just how much it's going to cost to provide new jobs. The site spans 1,100 acres on both sides of the river. When the boundary was drawn, more than 50 firms found themselves fortunately within it. From today, they'll stop paying rates and some taxes at an estimated cost to the government in the first year of £5 million. But on half the site, mostly undeveloped, only 6 new jobs have so far been secured in a tar macadam plant not yet built. Other factories haven't found tenants, although negotiations are continuing. Vickers Armaments plan a new £7 million factory for 700 workers at Scotswood, but only by moving them from an older plant nearby. So, say officials, the next few months will prove crucial if the enterprise zone is to cut unemployment significantly.
On the foreign exchanges, the pound fell sharply against a strong dollar, wiping out most of last week's recovery. It's also down against European currencies. Fears of continuing high American interest rates boosted the dollar, and by the close, the pound was down 4 cents exactly at $1.8250. And US interest rates were also responsible for a drop of 8.9 in the Financial Times index, which closed at 549.1. In Northern Ireland, a bomb has destroyed the partially built house belonging to the brother of the new MP for Fermanagh and South Tyrone, Owen Carron. It happened just after midnight at the village of Maguire's Bridge in County Fermanagh. No one was hurt. From there, Peter Gould reports.
All that's left of the brand new bungalow now is a pile of bricks and wood. The windows of houses a quarter of a mile away were shattered by the blast, although no one was hurt in the explosion. The house had been built by the MP's brother, Seamus Carron. He and his wife were hoping to move in before the birth of their first child next month. This afternoon, forensic scientists moved in cautiously to search for clues among the debris. One of the first visitors at the scene was the new MP, Owen Carron. He said he was concerned over reports that policemen were seen near the house before the bomb went off. Mr. Karen says the bombing of this house is the culmination of a series of sectarian attacks against his family. And he says that the presence of a police patrol in the grounds of the house about 5 hours before the explosion is very sinister. But this has drawn a swift response from the police. They say Mr. Karen's innuendo is untrue. Their duty, they say, is to protect life and property.
The President of Angola has appealed to the United Nations for action to end South African aggression and to prevent what he calls the imminent and massive invasion being prepared against his country. The Angolan Defence Ministry reports the bombing by the South African Air Force of the town of Kaama, more than 120 miles north of the border with Namibia. The Angolans say more than 45,000 South African troops are massed on the border and that armoured columns have penetrated deep into the southern provinces. The Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin is in Egypt for his 11th summit meeting with President Sadat. The talks, which are being held at the seaside resort of Alexandria, will concentrate on finding ways to resume negotiations on self-rule for the Palestinians in the occupied territories, including the West Bank. It's Mr. Begin's first summit with Egypt since his re-election, and he'll be resisting pressure to bring the PLO into the discussions. He'll also be asking President Sadat to speed up the process of establishing normal relations between the two countries. 3 F-15 jet fighters have left the United States for Israel, ending the embargo imposed 2 months ago. Arms deliveries to Israel were suspended after Israel used American-built planes for the raid, which destroyed the Iraqi nuclear plant in June. Iranian students have briefly occupied their embassies in The Hague and Brussels. In The Hague, police removed 17 protesters who said they were from PK, an organization for Iranian workers. In Brussels, the demonstrators hung a banner from the embassy demanding an end to the Ayatollah's rule. They said they supported former President Bani Sadr, who's in exile in Paris. There were 17 arrests in Brussels. Both occupations lasted less than an hour, and there were no casualties. Yesterday, anti-Khomeini demonstrators occupied the Iranian embassy in Stockholm. 2 men, one posing as a postman, carried out a big jewel robbery in the West End of London. They got away with nearly £750,000 worth of gems. Mike Mackay reports.
2 men, one posing as a postman and both wearing false moustaches and beards, talked their way into the Diamond Gallery. They were clearing the display stands after tying up the manager when a partner in the firm arrived to see the robbery in progress. He dashed into a hair salon across the road where a receptionist, while phoning the police, kept watch on the robbers.
We then witnessed 2 men exit quietly from the Diamond Gallery. They made their way towards a brown Mercedes parked at the curb here, entered it and drove away. The police then arrived. I showed a uniformed officer where the car had been parked, and under where it had been parked I found a diamond ring surrounded by emeralds and rubies in a starburst pattern.
Though spotted, the gang drove off so calmly in a brown Mercedes that witnesses had plenty of time to note the registration, FLC 769T.
The former architect John Poulson, who served 3 years in prison for corruption, successfully applied at Wakefield County Court for a variation in his discharge from bankruptcy granted last year. It was so that he could pay less income tax on the money he's received for his autobiography, due to be published next month. Ken Cooper was at the hearing.
John Poulson returned smiling to the same courtroom where 9 years ago his bankruptcy hearing revealed the first details of his amazing web of corruption. Details that led eventually to the imprisonment of Poulson and several other highly placed figures. Today, the court reduced Poulson's tax liability on the proceeds from his memoirs, a £35,000 advance plus royalties, to be divided equally between him and his creditors. And Poulson says he could tell more.
Oh my gosh, if I wanted, I could fill volumes.
You say in the book there are still guilty men who haven't paid, as you call it, the price. How do you feel about that?
It isn't for me to, I can't do anything about it, can I?
A coroner in Brighton has returned a verdict of accidental death on the jockey Joe Blanks, who died after falling from his horse during a race last month. Joe Blanks was trampled by other horses on the course and never recovered consciousness. Champion jockey Willie Carson has left hospital a week after his fall at York races. He fractured his skull when his horse Silken Knot broke 2 legs, throwing him under the following field. He was escorted to the ambulance by his girlfriend. Cricket. The Yorkshire fast bowler Chris Old may not be fit for the final test against Australia starting on Thursday at the Oval. He has a back injury, so Mike Hendrick of Derbyshire has been added to the party from whom the team will be chosen. A 9-year-old boy from Surrey who's always wanted to be a soldier has had his ambition fulfilled by the Royal Engineers. He spent the day at their main training base near Aldershot, as Nigel Farrell reports.
For several years, Michael Webb has been crazy about the army, and today he was kitted out in combat gear and light machine gun, magazine empty, to see for himself what army life was really like. Michael had written to the Royal Engineers, specifically asking if he could drive an armoured personnel carrier, and today he had the chance of actually helping to steer a group of other local school children around the training compound. After that, it was time for a spin at the helm of a fast assault craft and a swing at the wheel of one of the engineers' heavy bridging cranes. Do you still want to join the army, and do you still want to be a soldier?
Yes.
Do you still want to be a Royal Engineer?
You'd better say yes to that question with
He's
me
not
sitting
sure
here.
about that, is it? Of course, the army weren't going to let him get away without a bit of basic square bashing. But then, that never did anyone any harm.
Poor little mite. That's the news. We'll be back at 9 o'clock. Now the weather, John Sherwood.
Good evening. Well, there are 2 or 3 more fine days to come for most parts of the country, as we have high pressure staying near the south of the country. However, we are going to find further weak frontal systems crossing northern areas from time to time, giving some cloud and drizzle, this mainly near western coasts. As far as tonight's concerned, first of all, though, I think it's going to be a fine night in many places with some fog patches forming towards dawn, I think, in many inland parts of England, Wales and eastern Scotland. Northern Ireland, too, may have some fog patches. Some fog, too, near some of these western coasts, and also some cloud thick enough for some spots of drizzle. Perhaps some more general rain at times in the very far north. And then tomorrow, although some places will start rather cloudy, especially in Northern Ireland and parts of eastern Scotland, I think you'll find the sun coming through there during the day, and then most of the country having a fine day, a reasonable amount of sunshine, helping temperatures up to, if anything, a degree or 2 higher than they've been today. It's going to stay rather cloudy near some of these western coasts, though, with some further fog and drizzle from time to time. And again, up in the far north of Scotland, the Northern Isles, you may well have a more general spell of rain later on. That's all from me. Good evening.
This is BBC1.
Good evening. Nationwide tonight, a trip to Disney World. We follow 8 very brave children, all suffering from incurable illnesses on the holiday of a lifetime. Plus a voyage to Saturn. Astronomer Patrick Moore explains what the scientists are learning from the latest American space mission. But we start with some news from London and the South East. As unemployment surges towards the 3 million mark, the number of people out of work in the South East has risen to 664,000. That's a rise of nearly 32,000 in the last month, despite a small improvement in the figures for school leavers. A 16-year-old boy accused of murdering Michelle Shields appeared at Camden Juvenile Court this morning. He was remanded for a week in a secure local authority care unit. Now to the less troubled world of Saturn. It's almost a year since we Earthlings first marvelled at close-up pictures of the planet Saturn and its mysterious rings, beamed back 1 billion miles by an unmanned spacecraft called Voyage 1. Her sister ship, Voyager 2, was launched into space from Pasadena, California in 1977 and has been travelling ever since at over 30,000 miles an hour on a grand tour of faraway planets in the solar system. Her present mission is a close encounter with Saturn and its many moons, and then it's on to Uranus, expected arrival January 1986. By August 1989, Voyager's Odyssey should have taken her past Neptune, and then she'll be lost forever in the vast emptiness of the Milky Way. Voyager will become closest to Saturn in the early hours of tomorrow morning, but already the scientists are monitoring her progress and are excited by the pictures she's been beaming back to Earth. They've already counted 17 ice ball moons circling the planet, which they believe provide the gravitational support for the spectacular ring system. One of the closest pictures shows the odd shape of Saturn's moon Hyperion, which some scientists believe was smashed by a cosmic collision. Patrick Moore, does that seem a likely explanation?
Well, it doesn't seem at all likely, but I certainly can't think of anything better. And you've got to explain the strange shape of Hyperion somehow. We know that very small satellites are often irregular in shape, but Hyperion's a bit too large for that, so it really is very much of a mystery, and I can't really improve on the collision theory. And, you know, I'm even more interested, I think, in the outer and larger satellite, the one called Iapetus. And that appears to be half very bright and half blacker than a blackboard.
And there's some rather strange names attached to the blackness and the whiteness, aren't there?
Oh, yes, all kinds of goo stuff, but we don't really know what it is. The point, I don't think there's much doubt that Iapetus itself is made up essentially of ice. So this black surface covering one hemisphere is a deposit. And how did it get there? Well, there are two possibilities. A lot of people think that it may have been drifted onto the surface of Iapetus from the outer small moon, the one we call Phoebe. But I don't think that's very likely, because Phoebe is very small and a long way off. And it's more likely, I think, that the dark deposit has come up from somehow inside Iapetus. But exactly how, I don't pretend to know.
But, of course, the pictures of Iapetus were already shown to us last September, the earlier
they weren't. Not good ones. The Voyager 1 only went within a long way from Iapetus. Voyager 2 went close in. Voyager 1 did go much closer to the big satellite, Titan. That's the one covered with an orange smog. But Voyager 2 won't do that. There's no real point.
But, of course, Voyager 2 is going to get so much closer than Voyager 1 ever did that that's really why it's all so exciting, isn't it?
Absolutely so. And, of course, it's already sending back dramatic pictures of the ring system and the surface of the planet. You saw on the film those strange radial spokes that come across the bright ring. They appear to emerge from the shadow, go round with the rings, and then dissipate. And they shouldn't really be there. They're most mysterious things. And the main point of interest, I think, from the Voyager 2 pictures so far is that they've got very sharp edges. Just what they are, what these spokes are, we don't know. It could be particles levitated above the main ring system by electrostatic or magnetic forces. We don't know yet.
Patrick, what do you think would be the most exciting thing that this Voyager trip could discover about Saturn?
I think, on the whole, the nature of the ring system itself. You see, the rings are not nearly as straightforward as we used to think. There are hundreds of them and hundreds of minor divisions. And one theory is that inside the ring system there are circling a large number of tiny moons, moonlets, if you like, a few miles in diameter.
So there could be hundreds of moons
There
going
could
around
well
Saturn.
be. This is one theory, and I can't really see any other answer to it. On the other hand, when does a ring particle stop being a ring particle and become a small moon?
Well, before we get into sort of hyperphysics, can I ask you one quick point that I'm sure everybody wants to know? Any chance of life on Saturn, or any chance that Voyager is going to find life elsewhere in the solar system?
I think it's absolutely fair to say that there's no chance of life as we know it on Saturn. I don't believe in alien life of the bug-eyed monster type. The only possibility was some kind of organic material on Titan, and that seems very unlikely, if only because of the low temperature.
And
no,
very
in
quickly,
our
what
solar
about the
system,
remaining two planets that it's going to visit?
Uranus and Neptune, well, they're smaller than Jupiter and Saturn. They're made up chiefly of water, ice and gas, and are very lonely, very cold, very remote, and totally lifeless.
So perhaps no signs of life. Thank you very much, Patrick Moore.